My dad forced me to leave and moved his pregnant bride into my inherited home. You won't believe how it ended. What would you do if the one person you should be able to trust, your own father, asked you to give up the only home you've ever known? Not just any home, but the one you inherited from your grandparents, your last connection to a family you lost too soon? This is the story of how my dad, blinded by a new love and a baby on the way, tried to push me out of my own house. But the dark truth I eventually unleashed didn't just stop their plans, it left them in ruins. This is a long one, so grab a drink, get comfortable, and let me take you back to where it all began. I'm 23 years old, and for most of my life, I've lived in a beautiful, sprawling house just outside the city, a house that was my sanctuary. It wasn't just a house, it was a time capsule of love, filled with the memories of my grandparents. My world shattered when I was 11. My mom, my absolute best friend, lost her battle with cancer. It was a blow that left a crater in my life. My dad, a man who always provided but was often physically distant due to work, tried his best, but his job kept him on the road for weeks at a time. It was my grandparents who truly stepped up, becoming my anchors in the storm. They wrapped me in a warmth and stability that I desperately needed, filling my days with stories of my mom, teaching me how to bake, and making sure I never felt the weight of my loss alone. We were a trio, bound by love and loss, and this house was our kingdom. My mom was an only child, just like me, so when my grandparents passed away a few years ago, their legacy fell entirely to me. The house, a modest sum of money, and my grandpa's beloved, slightly rusty but endlessly reliable truck. It was bittersweet. I was the keeper of their memories, and I couldn't imagine living anywhere else. The house felt like them, and in a way, staying here felt like keeping a part of them alive. So I settled into a quiet routine, focusing on my studies and cherishing the peaceful solitude of the home that had nurtured me. Fast forward to the present day. My dad, now in his late 40s, had been dating a woman named Alicia. She was younger, in her early 30s, and at first glance seemed pretty cool. She was vibrant, energetic, and had a way of making my dad laugh that I hadn't heard in years. She came with a ready-made family, 2 kids from a previous relationship, a 6-year-old boy and an 8-year-old girl. They were whirlwinds of energy, constantly underfoot and filling the quiet halls with their shouts and laughter. But they were good kids at heart. For about 6 months, my dad and Alicia had been discussing the future, and eventually he came to me with a proposition. He asked if they could move into the house with me. He pointed out that it was a big place, with more than enough rooms for everyone, and he framed it as a way for us to be a family again, to fill the empty spaces with life. I was hesitant, I'll admit. I cherished my quiet, but the thought of my dad being around more and the house not feeling so empty was appealing. So, after some thought, I agreed, thinking it could be nice to have a fuller, more lively home. For a while, things were relatively smooth. The kids and I developed a routine. I'd help them with their homework, and they'd drag me into their games. The house, once silent, now buzzed with a new kind of energy. But then, the dynamic shifted. Alicia announced she was pregnant. Suddenly, the air in the house changed. The focus narrowed, and the unspoken hierarchies became more defined. My dad was over the moon, and it wasn't long before he proposed. It was no surprise to anyone. They seemed genuinely in love, and a wedding was quickly planned. That's when the hints started, subtle at first, then growing more direct. Alicia would make comments about how much space a baby needs, how they'd need to set up a nursery, and how my room, with its large windows and view of the garden, would be perfect. Then she dropped the bombshell. She told me point blank that I should start thinking about moving out because they would need my room for the new baby. She didn't stop there. She mentioned that her own mother would be moving in to help with the baby and her other 2 kids. The sheer audacity of it left me speechless. Here's the real kicker in all of this. Alicia had no idea that the house actually belonged to me. My dad had never mentioned it, and it became clear he was intentionally avoiding the subject, letting her believe he was the homeowner. The situation escalated from ridiculous to insulting when Alicia suggested I move into her small apartment in the city, generously offering to give me a good deal on rent while I finished my education. I was living in my own inheritance, and she was trying to charge me rent for her spare room. The tension was thick enough to cut with a knife, and I knew a confrontation was brewing just beneath the surface. The breaking point arrived one weekend when my dad was home. The atmosphere was already strained, a fragile truce that was ready to shatter. We were all in the living room, and Alicia was flipping through a magazine, pointing out nursery color schemes. She looked up at me, a sweet but calculated smile on her face, and said that since the baby would be here in a few months, it was probably time for me to start packing. She said it so casually, as if she were commenting on the weather. The words hung in the air, and I felt a surge of adrenaline, a hot mix of anger and disbelief. Every ounce of patience I had been clinging to evaporated in that single moment. This was my home. This was the home my grandparents had built, the place where my dad had grown up, the last physical connection I had to my mother. And this woman, this guest in my house, was telling me to leave. I took a deep breath, the kind you take before you dive into cold water, and I looked her straight in the eye. I told her, in a voice that was surprisingly calm and steady, that the house was mine. I explained that it had been left to me by my grandparents, that it was my inheritance, and that I had no intention of going anywhere. The silence that followed my declaration was deafening. You should have seen the look on Alicia's face. It was a masterpiece of shock, confusion, and dawning horror. Her mouth fell open slightly, and her eyes darted from me to my dad, as if searching for a denial that would never come. My dad just stood there, looking like a deer caught in the headlights, his face flushed with a mixture of shame and panic. I continued, my voice gaining strength. I suggested that perhaps my dad could use some of his savings, the money he had been diligently putting away for years, to buy a new place for his expanding family. I even suggested they could sell Alicia's apartment to help with the down payment. It seemed like a perfectly reasonable, logical solution to me. Alicia, however, did not see it that way. The shock on her face morphed into a fury so intense it was almost terrifying. She accused me of being selfish, of trying to push them out and ruin her plans of building equity in her apartment. She went on a tirade about how my dad had led her to believe they were building a life together in a home that was supposed to be theirs, how she had sacrificed her own financial stability for this relationship, and how I was now throwing it all back in her face. The whole situation devolved into chaos. My dad tried to step in and mediate, but he only made things worse. He floundered, trying to placate both of us, and ended up suggesting that maybe it was time for me to be independent, that I was a young adult and it was natural for me to want to spread my wings. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My own father was siding with her, telling me to leave my own home. That's when the dam broke. A huge argument erupted, a screaming match that echoed through the halls that had once been so peaceful. I reminded him of everything our family had been through, of how much this house meant to me as a connection to our past, to my mom, to his own parents. I laid it all bare, my pain, my sense of betrayal, my feeling of being abandoned all over again. From that day forward, the house became a battleground. Alicia saw me as the villain, the obstacle standing in the way of her perfect family life. She became cold and distant, shooting me icy glares across the dinner table. Her kids, who used to seek me out to play or read with, were now kept at a distance, instructed by their mother to leave me alone. My dad was caught in the middle, a pathetic figure trying to keep everyone happy but failing miserably. He would try to talk to me, to reason with me, but his words were hollow, tainted by his betrayal. This whole ordeal left me stressed and isolated in my own home. It was a bizarre and suffocating feeling to be an outsider in the place where I had grown up, where I had felt the most love and security. I felt like I was standing on a crumbling bridge, trying to hold it all together while the world around me collapsed. I was losing my father, my home, and my peace of mind, all at once. I started talking to friends, venting my frustrations, and their reactions were a mix of outrage and validation. One friend said, "Well, too bad. Don't get with a woman so much younger than you if you're not ready to pick up the tab for your future children because you want to save for your retirement." Another pointed out, "It looks like his new baby's mama thought he was older and wealthy so she could get more out of him, but this whole thing fell flat when she noticed that he didn't own the house. The gall to kick you out, but then offer her old living arrangements at a discount? Nope, you are not the idiot." Their words were a small comfort, but the tension in the house was a constant, heavy weight on my chest. The situation was untenable, and I knew it was only a matter of time before something had to give. The fragile peace in the house finally shattered completely. Shortly after the explosive argument where I revealed the truth about the house's ownership, my dad and Alicia had a massive blowout fight. I could hear their muffled shouting from behind their closed bedroom door, a storm of anger and accusation. Later, I learned from my dad that Alicia was absolutely furious. She felt blindsided and betrayed, convinced that my dad had intentionally kept the truth from her, that he had lied by omission. She couldn't understand why he would let her believe they were building a future in a home that wasn't his to share. Their relationship, which had once seemed so solid, was now riddled with cracks and tension. The atmosphere in the house grew even more toxic, a thick cloud of resentment that hung over every room. Alicia's frustration finally boiled over one evening. I was in the kitchen, making a cup of tea, trying to stay out of everyone's way, when she cornered me. Her eyes were blazing, and her voice was low and venomous. She started yelling, not screaming, but a controlled, intense tirade about how unfair it all was. She ranted about how she and her kids were living in someone else's house, how they had no security, no place to truly call their own. She accused my dad of leading her on, of painting a picture of a life that was a complete fantasy. I stood my ground, my back against the kitchen counter, and calmly reminded her that this was my grandparents' house, that it was my home, and that I was not going to be forced out of it. My response only seemed to fuel her anger, and she stormed out of the kitchen, slamming a cabinet door so hard that the glasses inside rattled. The next day, my dad confronted me. He looked terrible, with deep, dark circles under his eyes and a permanent grimace etched on his face. He was visibly stressed and exhausted, a man caught between a rock and a hard place. He sat me down at the dining room table, the same table where my grandparents had served countless family dinners, and he begged me. He pleaded with me to reconsider moving out, saying it would make things easier for everyone, that it would save his relationship with Alicia and the mother of his unborn child. I was shocked and hurt by his request. It felt like a final, definitive act of abandonment. I looked at him, this man who was supposed to be my protector, and I told him that this house was my home, my last tangible connection to my mom and my grandparents, and that I wasn't going to leave. I told him that if anyone should leave, it was them. My dad's reaction was something I never could have anticipated. He didn't just get angry, he turned on me. He blamed me for the turmoil in his relationship with Alicia. He said that if I hadn't been so stubborn, so selfish, and had just agreed to move out, none of this would be happening. He accused me of enjoying the drama, of deliberately sabotaging his happiness. His words were like a punch to the gut, a betrayal so deep it took my breath away. I couldn't believe that he was turning on me like this, that he was painting me as the villain in this story he had created. Feeling overwhelmed and cornered, I knew I had to protect myself. I decided to seek legal advice, just to understand my rights and make sure I wasn't missing something. I consulted with a family lawyer who assured me that as the legal owner of the house, I had every right to stay and to make decisions about who lived there. He also warned me that the situation could get complicated if I wasn't careful. This gave me some peace of mind, a small shield against the onslaught, but the tension at home remained unbearable. Then the final bombshell dropped. One afternoon, I came home to find the house eerily quiet. I walked into the master bedroom to find it half empty. Alicia had packed up her things and taken her kids to stay with her mother. On the kitchen counter, she left a note for my dad. It was short and to the point. She wrote that she couldn't live in a house where she wasn't welcome, that she felt like an intruder, and that my dad needed to choose between his daughter and his new family. My dad was devastated when he came home and found the note. He blamed me, his voice thick with anger and grief, claiming that I had driven Alicia and her kids away. In a last-ditch, desperate effort to fix things, he came to me with a suggestion that left me completely floored. He suggested that we sell the house and split the money. He said it was the only way to start fresh, to get a clean slate, and to make things right with Alicia. Selling the house meant losing the last piece of my grandparents' legacy, the place that held the most precious memories of my life. I refused, stating clearly and unequivocally that I wasn't going to sell the house. My dad, now desperate and feeling completely cornered, lashed out one last time. He said that if I didn't agree to sell, he would cut ties with me and move in with Alicia and her mother. He accused me of being selfish, of ruining his life, of choosing a house over my own family. At that moment, I realized that my dad was making his choice, and it wasn't me. I told him that if he wanted to leave, he was free to do so, but I would not be manipulated or bullied into selling my home. True to his word, my dad packed his bags and left that evening, moving in with Alicia. The house felt emptier than ever before, but as I watched his taillights disappear down the driveway, I also felt a sense of relief. The constant tension was gone. The emotional toll had been immense, and while I felt a deep sadness over the loss of my relationship with my dad, I knew I had done the right thing. The house was my space again. The house was quiet. Too quiet. After the constant chaos and tension of the past few months, the silence felt both peaceful and profoundly lonely. I was alone in my grandparents' house, just as I had been before, but everything felt different. The air was cleaner, the weight on my chest lighter, but there was a gaping hole where my relationship with my dad used to be. I threw myself into my studies, trying to rebuild the sense of stability that had been so violently shaken. My great-uncle, my mom's uncle, became a rock for me. He'd check in, bring over groceries, and just sit with me in the quiet, offering a steady, comforting presence. He reminded me that I had done nothing wrong, that I was protecting my family's legacy, and that sometimes standing up for yourself means making painful choices. I was slowly starting to heal, to reclaim my home as a sanctuary once more. Just when I thought the dust was starting to settle, my dad came back into the picture with an even more shocking demand. It had been a few weeks since he'd left. I had just gotten back from class one afternoon when I saw his car parked in the driveway. My heart sank. He was sitting on the front porch steps, his shoulders slumped, looking more worn out and desperate than I had ever seen him. A part of me wanted to turn around and leave, but another part, the part that was still his daughter, couldn't. I took a deep breath and walked up the path. He asked if we could talk, and despite everything, I agreed. We sat down in the living room, the same room where so many arguments had taken place, the air thick with unspoken history. My dad started by apologizing, his voice heavy with a weariness that went beyond just a lack of sleep. He said he never wanted our relationship to deteriorate like this, that he missed me. For a moment, I felt a glimmer of hope, a flicker of the father I once knew. But then he dropped the bombshell. He wanted to know if Alicia and her kids could move back into the house. He claimed that living at her mother's small apartment was too cramped and stressful, that they were all on top of each other, and that they needed more space, especially with the baby on the way. He painted a picture of misery and desperation, of a family struggling to get by. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. After everything that had happened, the lies, the manipulation, the betrayal, the ultimatum, he was asking me to let them back into my home, to welcome the very people who had tried to evict me? I took a deep breath, the same way I had before the last big confrontation, and calmly told him no. I explained that I needed a stable and peaceful environment to live and study, and that their presence would only bring back the chaos and conflict I had worked so hard to escape. I told him that I had finally started to feel like myself again, and I couldn't risk losing that. My dad's demeanor changed in an instant. The weary, apologetic man was gone, replaced by the angry, defensive man who had blamed me for everything. He accused me of being unforgiving and selfish, of putting my own needs above the needs of his real family. He said I was ruining his last chance at happiness, that I was punishing him for his mistakes. I stood my ground, my voice firm and unwavering, reiterating that the house was mine and I had every right to decide who lived there. Then came the ultimatum again. My dad, in a moment of sheer desperation and rage, threatened to disown me. He said that if I couldn't support him and his new family, then he wanted nothing more to do with me. He demanded that I choose. Either I allowed them back into the house, or he would cut me out of his life for good. The weight of his words hit me like a physical blow. I felt a mix of anger, sadness, and a profound sense of disbelief that he would do this to me again. But this time, something was different. I was stronger. I had been through the fire, and I had come out the other side. I knew I couldn't let myself be bullied or manipulated into making a decision that went against my own well-being. I looked him in the eye and told him that I was sorry he felt that way, but my answer was still no. I wasn't going to sacrifice my peace and the legacy of my grandparents for his demands. My dad looked at me with a mix of shock and rage, as if he couldn't believe I was defying him again. Then, without another word, he turned and walked out of the house, slamming the door behind him. I watched as he got in his car and sped away, feeling a profound sense of loss, but also a strong, unwavering conviction that I had done the right thing. It was clear that our relationship had reached a breaking point, and while it hurt more than I could say, I knew I had to prioritize my own mental health and my future. In the days that followed my dad's second departure, I received a few hostile messages from Alicia. They were filled with accusations, calling me heartless and cruel for turning my back on my family, for denying a newborn a stable home. I blocked her number, refusing to engage in the drama. But I also had an outpouring of support from my great-uncle, my friends, and even a few relatives who had heard the full story and now understood the extent of what I had been through. Their validation was a balm to my wounded spirit. I was trying to focus on my studies and the future I was building for myself, a future in this house, a future that was peaceful and mine. This house was my sanctuary, and I was determined to honor my grandparents' memory by living a life they would be proud of. A few days later, I received an urgent message from my dad. It was short and simple. Alicia had the baby, a boy. The news was bittersweet. On one hand, I was happy for the safe arrival of my half-brother, a new life in the world. On the other hand, I couldn't ignore the tension and the unresolved issues that lingered between me and my dad, the chasm that had only grown wider. I replied with a simple, "Congratulations," and left it at that. Shortly after the birth, Alicia reached out to me directly. I was surprised, but I decided to answer her call. Her voice was emotional, laced with a desperation that was almost palpable. She said that their current living situation at her mother's apartment was unbearable, especially with a newborn. She emphasized how small the space was, how the constant noise and lack of privacy were stressing her out. She said my dad's constant commuting from his friend's couch to the apartment was exhausting and unsustainable. Her main point, however, was the baby. She said their newborn son needed a quiet, stable environment away from the chaos of the city. She proposed that they move back into the house with me. This time, her approach was different. She wasn't demanding, she was pleading. She assured me that she understood my feelings now, that she had had time to think, and she promised that things would be different. She even said I could stay in my room, that they would respect my space, and that we could all coexist for the sake of the baby. She painted a picture of a harmonious household, a blended family coming together for the good of the child. I was torn. The idea of having my half-brother around, of being a part of his life, was appealing, but I couldn't forget the months of manipulation and drama they had brought into my life. I couldn't forget the way my dad had turned on me, the way Alicia had tried to push me out. I needed time to think, so I asked Alicia to give me a day to consider her request. That evening, I spoke with my great-uncle. I laid out the whole situation, the emotional appeal, the promise of a fresh start. He listened patiently, and when I was done, he reminded me of the importance of protecting my peace and my well-being. He didn't tell me what to do, but he urged me to think carefully, to remember the past, and to trust my gut. After a lot of soul-searching, staring out the window at the garden my grandmother had so lovingly tended, I realized that allowing them back into the house would be a mistake. It wouldn't be a new beginning, it would be a return to the same toxic environment, just with a baby in the mix. The potential for conflict was too high, and the risk to my own mental health was too great. The next day, I called Alicia and my dad, putting them on speakerphone together. I explained my concerns and why I couldn't let them move back in. I told them that while I cared about my half-brother and wanted the best for him, the history of manipulation and emotional turmoil they had caused made it impossible for me to welcome them back into my home. My dad exploded with anger, his voice cracking with fury. He accused me of being selfish and heartless, of punishing him for his past mistakes, and of denying my half-brother a better life. Alicia, although more composed, was clearly disappointed and tried to guilt-trip me, saying I was depriving the baby of a peaceful upbringing and a loving family. Despite their emotional appeals, I stood my ground. I reiterated that my decision was final and that I couldn't sacrifice my mental health and stability for them. I even offered to help them find another place, suggesting a few affordable options I had seen online that were within a reasonable distance from the city. My dad's reaction was predictably harsh. He reiterated his threat to disown me and said I would regret my decision for the rest of my life. Alicia, on the other hand, seemed to accept my refusal with a heavy heart, but made it clear that she believed I was making a huge mistake. Since then, I have focused on maintaining my own peace and continuing with my studies. The emotional weight of my decision has been heavy, but I know it was the right choice for me. This house is not just a building, it's a sanctuary that represents my journey, my growth, and my commitment to a better future. A few weeks after I turned down my dad and Alicia's request to move back into my house, I got a call from my dad. The sound of his voice on the other end of the line was startling. He sounded more distressed, more broken than I had ever heard him. He asked if we could meet in person to talk about something important. Despite everything that had happened, a part of me still cared. A part of me was curious. I agreed to meet him. We chose a quiet cafe in a neutral part of town, a place with no memories attached. As I sat across the table from him, I was struck by how much he had aged. He looked smaller, defeated, and what he told me left me absolutely stunned. My dad revealed that he and Alicia were getting a divorce. The words hung in the air between us, heavy and unbelievable. He went on to explain that Alicia, it turned out, had been taking advantage of him financially all along. He had been so blinded by his infatuation, so desperate to make his new family work, that he had ignored the warning signs. She had pressured him into spending a significant amount of his savings on her lifestyle, on expensive gifts, on lavish vacations, and on supporting her kids, all while, he suspected, planning to leave him once she had drained him dry. The final straw had come a few days earlier. My dad had noticed some discrepancies in his bank accounts, some withdrawals he couldn't explain. He did some digging and discovered that Alicia had been siphoning money from his accounts for months. He found evidence that she was planning to flee with her kids and the new baby, leaving him with nothing. He told me that he had confronted her with the evidence, and Alicia didn't even try to deny it. Instead, she turned cold and manipulative, blaming him for everything. She said that if he had provided more for her, if he had been a better provider, she wouldn't have had to take such drastic measures. The realization that Alicia had been a gold digger all along, that the entire relationship had been a transaction to her, was a harsh and devastating blow to my dad. In the midst of this shocking revelation, my dad looked at me, his eyes filled with a pain so deep it was almost tangible, and he apologized. He apologized for everything. He admitted that he had been a fool, that he had been blinded by his infatuation with Alicia, and that he had made terrible, unforgivable decisions that had hurt our relationship and betrayed my trust. He said he regretted siding with her, regretted pressuring me to leave my home, and regretted choosing her over me. He seemed genuinely remorseful, and for the first time in a long while, I saw a glimpse of the dad I used to know, the dad who had taught me to ride a bike and comforted me when I scraped my knee. He asked if there was any way we could start to rebuild our relationship, if I could ever forgive him. He explained that he felt lost and alone, and that he didn't know how to move forward without my support. It was a lot to process, a tidal wave of information and emotion. I told him I needed time to think about it, that I couldn't just erase the past few months. Alicia, on the other hand, did not go quietly. During the divorce proceedings, she tried to take advantage of the situation, claiming she deserved half of everything my dad owned. In a move that was both audacious and predictable, she even tried to claim a stake in the house, even though she knew it was legally mine. She also demanded full custody of their baby, using the child as leverage to try and get more money from my dad. But my dad, finally free from her manipulation, fought back. His lawyer presented overwhelming evidence of Alicia's financial abuse and her deceptive intentions. The court sided with my dad, granting him a fair settlement and ensuring that Alicia couldn't take advantage of him any further. She was awarded a modest settlement, but nothing close to what she had been aiming for. In the end, my dad was granted joint custody of my half-brother, and he's determined to be a good father to him despite everything that's happened. As for Alicia, she moved back to the city with her kids, leaving my dad to pick up the pieces of his shattered life. This whole ordeal has been a roller coaster of emotions, but in the end, I agreed to give my dad a chance to rebuild our relationship. I knew it wouldn't be easy, that it would take time and effort from both of us, but I also saw that he was truly sorry. He's been staying with a friend for now, trying to figure out his next steps and rebuild his life from the ground up. As for me, I'm continuing to focus on my studies and my future. The house remains my sanctuary, a place where I can find peace and stability. This journey has taught me the importance of standing firm in my convictions and protecting my well-being, no matter the cost. After everything that's happened, I'm thrilled to share some truly positive news, a final chapter to this saga that is both shocking and heartwarming. After Alicia left and the divorce was finalized, my dad and I began the slow, sometimes awkward, but ultimately rewarding process of rebuilding our relationship. He was humbled, his ego stripped away by the betrayal he had endured. He moved in with me temporarily, staying in one of the guest rooms while he figured out his next steps. It wasn't easy at first. There were moments of tension, echoes of past arguments that lingered in the air. But over time, we started to find a new rhythm, a new way of being father and daughter. He was genuinely remorseful, and we both worked hard to heal the wounds of the past, to communicate openly and honestly. A few months ago, my dad met a woman named Laura, and from the moment I met her, I knew she was different. Laura is kind, compassionate, and has a warm, gentle presence that immediately put me at ease. She's a nurse, and they met while my dad was volunteering at a community health event, something he had started doing to try and give back and find some purpose. Laura has a daughter who's in college, and they seem to have a great relationship, built on mutual respect and open communication. Seeing my dad happy again, truly happy, was like a breath of fresh air after being trapped in a stuffy room for years. I was hopeful, but I was also cautious, my past experiences making me wary. Laura and I met several times, for coffee, for walks in the park, and we got along wonderfully. She respected my boundaries, understood the significance of my home, and never once made me feel like I was in the way. It was clear she genuinely cared about my dad, and it was also clear that she saw me as a part of his life, not an obstacle to it. Their relationship blossomed quickly, but in a healthy, supportive way that was worlds apart from the toxic dynamic he had with Alicia. One evening, my dad sat me down, a nervous but hopeful look on his face. He asked if Laura and her daughter could move in with us. He explained that Laura was facing some financial difficulties after generously helping her daughter with tuition, and that moving in together would benefit everyone financially. He also admitted that he loved her and wanted to build a life with her. I saw how happy Laura made my dad, how much he wanted this new chapter to work, and I saw the genuine goodness in her. I agreed, but I had one condition, a non-negotiable one. My dad had to tell Laura, up front and before they moved in, that the house belonged to me. I didn't want any misunderstandings, any potential for the kind of conflict we had experienced with Alicia. I needed transparency. My dad agreed without a moment's hesitation, understanding completely why it was so important to me. The next evening, we all sat down together in the living room. My dad took Laura's hand, took a deep breath, and told her the full story. He told her how the house was my grandparents' legacy, how I had inherited it, and about the tumultuous, painful events with Alicia that had led us to this point. He laid it all bare, his voice filled with a mix of shame and honesty. Laura listened attentively, her expression soft and empathetic. When my dad finished, she turned to me with a warm, sincere smile. She thanked me for being so open and honest, and for being willing to give her a chance. She said she respected my boundaries and my home, and that she was grateful for the opportunity to live here. She promised to honor this space and to support us both. Her response was so genuine and heartfelt that I felt a weight lift off my shoulders I hadn't even realized I was still carrying. Laura and her daughter moved in a week later, and the house has been filled with a sense of warmth and family that I hadn't felt in a long, long time. Living together has been surprisingly smooth. Laura and I have developed a close bond, and her daughter and I get along well too. My dad is happier than I've seen him in years, and the atmosphere in the house is one of mutual respect and support. Amidst all this joy and healing, I also received some shocking news about Alicia. Apparently, after she left my dad, she quickly got involved with another man. This new relationship, from what I heard through the grapevine, turned sour almost as fast as it began. She's now struggling both financially and emotionally. Her new partner turned out to be controlling and manipulative, leaving her in a difficult and precarious situation. It's a strange feeling, knowing that Alicia, who once tried to manipulate and take advantage of my dad and me, is now facing her own struggles. Part of me feels a sense of karmic justice, a quiet satisfaction that the universe has a way of balancing things out. But another part of me, the part that will always be connected to her through my half-brother, feels a twinge of sympathy. Despite everything she did, it's hard to see someone go through such hardship. However, I know better than to get involved. I've learned the hard way the importance of protecting my peace and focusing on my own happiness. My dad, who has also heard about Alicia's situation, seems conflicted but is resolved. He still feels a residual guilt and a sense of responsibility for her well-being, but he is focusing on his new life with Laura and the happiness they found together. We've talked about it, and he's agreed that it's best not to get entangled in her problems again. As for our family, we are moving forward, stronger and more united than ever. My dad and Laura are incredibly supportive of my own life. You see, a few months ago, I met someone special. His name is Alex, and he's a software engineer I met at a mutual friend's party. From the moment we met, there was an undeniable connection, and we've quickly become inseparable. Alex is kind, understanding, and incredibly supportive. He knows all about my family history and the challenges I faced, and he's been a rock through everything. We've grown closer each day, and recently, he proposed. I said yes. We're getting married, and I couldn't be happier. Planning the wedding has been an exciting whirlwind, and I'm looking forward to starting this new chapter of my life with him right here in the house that has been my constant, my sanctuary. It feels surreal to be surrounded by so much love and support after all the turmoil we've been through. This journey has been a testament to the power of resilience, forgiveness, and the importance of setting boundaries. It's shown me that it's possible to rebuild and move forward, even after the most tumultuous of times. Here's to new beginnings, unexpected blessings, and the strength to embrace life's twists and turns with hope, courage, and an open heart.